Hey, this is ShawNshawN. Welcome to my channel. I do specials on eBay, and you can also check art on my website, ShawNshawN.co. Today I'm going to review Into the Spider-Verse. So this movie is kind of interesting. It's all animated. So the last time there was kind of an animated Spider-Man series was kind of in 1967 on TV, which I saw growing up. And then later we had, the 90s, 2000s, they started making these Spider-Man movies because the CGI caught up and became good enough that you could do kind of this realistic version of Spider-Man swinging through the city of New York, Metropolitan, and all that. They did a pretty good job on those earlier movies. Now this movie kind of goes way off the deep end. Basically there's this new Spider-Man called Miles Morales. He's this kid. He's just a teenager. So basically the classic Peter Parker story, but Peter Parker, the real Peter Parker, is older. And so they meet, and so their tragedy ensues. Then he's kind of like, oh, what should I do? What should I do? And there's this machine with one of the villains, and he opens up this dimension. He breaks the universe, and all the multiple dimensions all seep in. And Spider-Man happens to be right into the middle of the machine at the time. So all the Spider-Man get drawn to the Spider-Man, and they all pop up on the other side. So in this case, they're all trying to figure out how to get back into the machine so they can go back to their own dimensions, because they're disintegrating literally as time goes by. So all these Spider-Man, they can't stay in our universe. They have to go back to their own. So this introduces some really crazy versions of Spider-Man. So not only you have another Peter Parker, but he's kind of a loser version of Peter Parker. And then you have Peter Porker. So this is actually a pig. Yes, Peter, which is totally like a little bit silly. You have a girl version. So she has kind of this blonde hair with shaved side. You have black and white Spider-Man, so that's really an interesting thing where he's like this 1930s Spider-Man fighting, and he only can see in black and white, which is, it's totally preposterous, but it's a comic book, so you can kind of do what you want, right? So that's kind of your basic of the plot. And at the same time, this kid is like, he's drawing his art, and he's an artist, and he's doing like a little bit of graffiti, doing his own slaps and sticking them up. So he's a graffiti artist. That's really kind of fun, but he's not really, and his dad's trying to steer him towards the path of school only. Forget about this graffiti. It's going to lead to the dark side, which is what the police do. They go and arrest graffiti artists, right, and send them to prison. So that's a real true dichotomy. At the same time, he has this uncle, and his uncle's into graffiti, and he actually takes him on a graffiti tour and all this. So his uncle's kind of leading him into the dark side, but we don't know what the uncle does. Maybe he's an artist, we're not sure. So it's kind of like the evil artist kind of thing, and then the good father trying to more overly moralistic, right? And the kid's name is Morales, so that's kind of morals. Another interesting part of the film is the mother is Hispanic, so she speaks a lot of Spanish, so she mixes into Spanish and English, which is fine. I understand it all, but it's really nice because they didn't even bother to translate it, so you get a real feel of in a Hispanic neighborhood where you hear some Spanish, not know what it is, and you just pick it up over time. So that was a really nice touch. Also, it's kind of like the first time they've done another time they've done a minority as kind of the main heroes. As you know, a lot of the Marvel comics were done in the 60s, 70s, and in that time frame, all the characters were generally white, except for, say, Black Panther. There were some exceptions to the rule, Wonder Woman, but in general, it's kind of like white man, saves the day kind of thing. And so, which they were kind of playing into the population and what people thought you had to cover, what they thought to sell them in most comics, right? And so this is kind of this nice spin-off, this African-American kid kind of with Hispanic connection. So it's a really interesting character. Oh, another one of the Spider-Man is this Asian chick from the year 3000. And the spider is separate from her in this huge robot thing, and she just jumps inside the ships. All her spider ship's powers are actually in the ship, so it's a little strange. But yeah, so that's, some of these Spider-Man is kind of like a little bit too much. I mean, I don't know if you need a spider pig. I don't know if you need the black and white Spider-Man was fun, but I don't know if he's necessary. Or maybe having two Peter Parkers that are normal, like one, the Peter Parker we know, and then the Peter Parker that's a loser. I don't know if you need two of those. Or, maybe get rid of the black and white Spider-Man. I don't know. It just seemed like there's a little bit too many Spider-Man from my viewpoint. I mean, you could have definitely done it with 3 and it would have been fine, or even 2 would have been fine, right? But it still works. It's a pretty long movie. It's 2 hours, but you really don't feel the length of the movie. Now, one of the other aspects is the stylization and the animation itself. So in this case, it has a little bit of a comic book feel, and at the same time, it's computerized. And at the same time, there's like this real zaniness to it. So it's a real artistic, and they have a lot of different styles they throw all together in the mix. So at one point you'll be kind of swinging through, and then it'll be like kind of shot into comic book style, which is based off a comic book, right? And it's animation, so it's like animation, comic book, back and forth. You actually have like the words like pow, zany, that kind of pops up, so that makes it really fun. You can do that, but normally they've only done it as preliminary thing and then they shoot a normal live action film, right? This is, the whole thing is like this, so it's really fun and zany. You know, personally, I didn't want to go see the film because I thought, it's a little kid's film, but then I heard the reviews were good, so I'm like, well, that's strange. How could it be so good that people are just raving on it? So I went and saw it, and I really have to agree, it's really a fun movie. The music's really kind of fun. They play in and out like a kid, like listening to music and ignoring his parents and all that kind of stuff. And all the music, kind of some of the music I grew up on. And you can really relate to that story if you kind of grew up in an urban environment, which I did in the suburbs of Chicago. So I kind of really related to, you know, the feel of this and values of the family and everything that comes around pretty strong. There's a little bit of tragedy in the movie, which also helps you bind further to the character of Miles. He has some personal tragedy with his family, so that really helps kind of, you know, bind to the character, as well as there's some tragedy with some of the Spider characters, which is good. You know, I mean, there's like 6, so if one of them dies, like, okay, whatever, right? The villains are pretty good, really fun as well. A lot of villains, more than one, which normally is kind of a bad thing in a Spider movie if you have too many villains, but they have 6 Spider-Man. They have like 3 villains all working on a villain team, so it's a villain team versus a kind of a Spider-Man team. But it all kind of works out in the end. I think they could have pared back a little bit on the Spider-Man team possibly, but it was pretty funny. Some of the best jokes they did do in the commercials, which is kind of sad, but they did a good job of not showing you some of the tragedy that happens in there, so that's really good because it hits you, but it hits you in a different way because, you know, you're expecting kind of the typical Spider-Man story where Uncle Ben dies because Spider-Man wasn't Spider-Man, and they have that, but they've done it in a whole different way, right? Because it's a new version of Spider-Man. So that's really fun. It looks like there might be a possible second Spider-Man where he goes into these other universes again. So it's kind of a nice, you know, possible what if into the next Spider-Man. The credits are really interesting, which usually credits you just want to skip, but obviously you're going to see the credits so you get to see the end trailer, which is really fun. They have a sign off to Stan Lee. Luckily they're able to get him to record the voice for his character Stan Lee in the movie, so they actually have it. So that's it's kind of odd feel because Stan Lee passed last year and then they still have him in the movie, and I guess in a couple of the coming Marvel movies they recorded a couple snippets, so they have snippets they can use in future movies. So that's a really cool thing that they added on, because then you'll see these snippets of Stan Lee in the future, and, you know, only the producers and the people that work on the movies actually know about them. So that's kind of fun because it'll keep his character kind of echoing through time, and it's a nice homage to the guy who created all these great comics. You know, one of the guys, obviously Kirby, can't think of his name, but he was the drawer, and Stan Lee came up with kind of the ideas behind all the adventures of the Marvel heroes. So that's my review. I hope you guys like it. Give it a thumbs up. If you want to go subscribe below, and see you on the next movie review. Thanks.